I hadn't been home in 6 years. Not for Christmas, not for birthdays, not for anything. And yet, there I was standing on the icy porch of my parents' house in Pineview, Montana, with a homemade bourbon pecan pie in one hand and a bottle of Dad's favorite whiskey in the other. I wore my old army coat, not because I was trying to make a statement, but because it was the warmest thing I owned. The porch smelled like cinnamon and fresh-cut pine. I could hear laughter through the walls. Clinking silverware. Someone shouted, "Pass the rolls." It all sounded normal, like I hadn't been erased. Then the door opened. Camille. Perfect hair, fake tan, fake smile. She looked me up and down like I was a stray dog that wandered into the wrong backyard. Then she leaned against the frame and said, in that sing-song condescending voice she's perfected since middle school, "You don't belong here." She didn't yell it. That would have taken too much energy. No, she whispered it like a secret she couldn't wait to leak. Then she gave me a slight smirk as she'd just checked off a box on her to-do list. And before I could say a word, she closed the door in my face. Just like that. Behind the glass, I saw movement. People laughing. My mom walked by with a bottle of wine. My brother threw his head back in a full-body laugh. No one noticed I hadn't come in. No one even looked at the door. I stood there for a second. Not long enough to cry, just long enough to feel something snap inside me. Then I stepped back off the porch, down the stairs, onto the sidewalk, and muttered, "Right, got it." It wasn't the cold that hurt. I'd done freezing patrol shifts at 3 a.m. in Kandahar. This wasn't that. This was different. This was the kind of cold that seeps into your ribs and tells you you're not part of the picture anymore. My name's Joanna Briggs. I spent the last 6 years serving in the U.S. Army. Combat logistics. Which, for the record, is a fancy way of saying I kept people alive by getting them what they needed when they needed it. Simple. Direct. Efficient. Qualities my sister has always found. Have you ever realized suddenly and all at once that your family never saw you as one of them? That your place at the table only existed when it made someone else look good by comparison? I climbed into my old Jeep, shut the door, and just sat there. Hands on the wheel. My heart was racing for no reason. I hadn't even made it inside and still somehow managed to ruin the night. Classic Joanna, right? Wrong. Because 10 minutes later, while I was halfway down Main Street, my phone started blowing up. 1 call, 2 calls, 3. All from the same person, Dad. I pulled over. Answered. The first thing I heard was my full name being screamed into the phone. "Joanna, where are you? You need to come back right now." I rolled the window down. The cold air slapped me across the face. "Why?" I asked, flat. He paused. I could hear the clatter of dishes in the background, the muffled hum of a house suddenly aware it had made a mistake. "You looked happy without me." Then he said something that changed everything. "Your sister told us you weren't coming. Comment below if you've ever been lied about by your own family and made to feel like the problem just for showing up. And while you're here, hit that subscribe button. We've got more stories that dig deep into the kind of drama you can't make up." He blinked. "She what?" I asked. "She said you declined the invite. Said you were spending Christmas with friends out of town." I took a slow breath. "I texted Mom 3 days ago," I said. "I never saw it," he replied. "We thought you were avoiding us again." Avoiding. That word hit differently. I stared at my phone like it had personally betrayed me. She told them I wasn't coming. Then I slammed the door in my face when I did. "She did what?" my dad asked, his voice rising. And just like that, it clicked. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a miscommunication. This wasn't even cruelty. It was strategy. Camille had rewritten the script before I even arrived. A clean little preemptive strike. She made sure everyone was comfortable, fed, and cozy before dropping the lie that I had ghosted them and that I was too prideful, too damaged, and too cold. Because what's more believable than the troubled army kid not showing up? "She planned this," I said quietly. "What are you talking about?" "I'll call you back." I hung up, turned off the engine, and stared into the dark. Camille had gotten away with this for years, framing me as the distant, unstable one. The unreliable sibling. The disappointment. But now? I had something I'd never had before. Receipts. And I was done pretending I didn't. Without turning on the GPS, I swung the car around and headed back toward the house. Not with good intentions. With proof. I didn't knock this time. I just walked straight in. The front door wasn't locked. Of course, it wasn't. Camille never believed she had anything to protect herself from. She thought she controlled every room she entered, even the ones I was done being quiet in. I stepped into the foyer, dripping snow and tracking slush onto the hardwood like some rude intruder. The smell of ham and pine hit me again, but this time, it didn't feel warm. It felt fake, like something had been sprayed on it to cover the rot. Nobody noticed me at first. The television was on low in the background, kids were fighting over seating, and someone was slicing pie in the kitchen. Camille's voice floated from the dining room, light and airy. "Oh, you know Joanna. She always makes a dramatic exit. She thrives on it." I walked farther in, past the tree, past the table. My mom glanced up from the sink and froze. Her wine glass clinked softly against the counter. My dad was the first to speak. "Joanna." He said it like a prayer, like I was a ghost he never expected to see again. I held up my phone. "You still think I never got the invitation?" Camille appeared from around the corner, still holding a fork, still smiling until she saw my face. "Joanna." "No," I said, voice low but steady. "Don't start." My dad looked between us, confused. "She just told us." "She lied," I cut in. "She's been lying. For years." "Okay," Camille said, raising her hands like she was above all this. "Can we not do this now?" "You already did it," I snapped. "I just showed up for it." The room had gone quiet. My little cousin Rhett paused mid-bite, a green bean dangling from his fork. Someone turned down the music. No one knew whose side to be on yet, and they were all waiting for a cue. "I texted Mom 3 days ago," I said, looking straight at her. And when she didn't answer, I assumed something was wrong, not that I was being filtered. My mom looked genuinely confused. I didn't get a text." I turned the phone around and held up the screen. Delivered. 3 days ago. 4:13 p.m. Camille crossed her arms. "So what? Phones mess up all the time. Maybe you had bad service. In Montana? At home? Where I grew up." Dad looked at Camille. "Did you read the text?" She blinked. "Two might have seen it. I didn't think it was clear," she said. "See you then." I assumed she meant next time. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable how far she'd go to stay believable. "I left a voicemail," I said. "You heard that?" No one answered. "I sent a card. I mailed a gift." Camille rolled her eyes. "We've been over this. You always do things last minute and expect people to read your mind. It's exhausting." "Exhausting?" I repeated. "What's exhausting is pretending we're still related after all this." "Okay," she said again, raising her voice like she was trying to reset the conversation. "Look, I didn't mean to upset anyone. I just didn't want people getting their hopes up. You've missed a lot of family things lately. I was just trying to keep things calm." Calm. She always said things like that. Words that sounded nice but were just polished control. "I didn't miss them," I said. "I was uninvited from them." "Or did you forget the time you RSVP'd for me to Aunt Sherry's wedding, then told her I canceled the day before?" Camille blinked. "You said I had deployment issues. I was working at a nonprofit in Arizona that week." And Douglas looked like he'd swallowed a battery. "And what about the 4th of July?" I added. "When you told everyone I didn't come because I hate America." "Oh, come on." Camille scoffed. "I have the texts." I held up the phone again. My thumb hovered over a folder I'd named Holiday Gaslight Chronicles. Dad stepped forward. "Wait, what texts? You want to read them?" I said, clicking the folder open. "Or should I just read them out loud?" Cammie's voice had changed. No longer airy. Now sharp, defensive. "This is ridiculous. You're digging up every little thing and twisting it. It's like you can't move on from anything unless you burn it down." "You burned it down," I said. I just stopped pretending the ashes were confetti. Rhett dropped his fork. Douglas turned to Camille, his face unreadable. Did you tell us she wasn't coming? She hesitated. Answer him, I said. I thought she wasn't, Camille said. I hadn't heard anything definite. Oh, you heard my voicemail, I said. No reply. You saw the gift I mailed. You posted it on Instagram with your name on the tag. A glass clinked softly. Someone gasped. And you said I'm dramatic. Nobody moved. Nobody said a word. I didn't sit down. I didn't ask for space at the table. I just stood there, the phone still in my hand, watching every person in that room process what they were seeing. And for once, they weren't seeing me as the problem. They were watching a carefully constructed version of Camille crack in real time. I didn't feel powerful. I felt clear. And I wasn't going anywhere. I didn't lower the phone. I let the silence do the talking. Camille shifted. For someone who always claimed she loved attention, she sure hated the wrong kind. Her eyes darted from Dad to Mom to the wine bottle on the counter as if one of them might rescue her. No one did. Mom finally spoke. Camille, did you really post Joanna's gift with your name on it? Camille didn't answer. Just tilted her head and shrugged like that was less incriminating than an outright lie. I tapped the screen. Here. The 22nd of December, 2:18 p.m. Caption says, From me to Dad, nothing like tradition. That's my handwriting on the tag. My brother, Trey, leaned forward. Wait, I saw that. I thought it was weird. Thanks, I said flatly. Great to know I've been weird for months and nobody said a thing. And it. Mom looked down at her glass like it might explain something. Dad was still staring at Camille like he was trying to do a long division in his head. Let me guess, I said. You also forgot to tell them about the Veterans Day card I mailed? Camille's lips pressed together. I swiped again. And what about the voicemail I left from Fort Sutter 3 years ago? Or the time I sent a care package from Kandahar that magically went missing? My thumb tapped through files like evidence in a trial. Screenshots. Voicemails. Tracking numbers. The whole digital graveyard is being erased. Trey squinted at my screen. You kept all that? Yeah, I said. Because when you've been ghosted by your own family, you learn to keep proof that you even exist. Dad flinched at that one. So did Mom. I thought you didn't want to talk to us, Mom whispered. I thought the army changed you, made you cold. No, I said. The army made me efficient. Camille made me invisible. Camille let out a breathy laugh, the kind people use when they know they're cornered and trying to look unbothered. Jesus, Joanna, this is insane. You're acting like I orchestrated some conspiracy just to shut you out of family dinners. You didn't orchestrate anything, I said. You just manipulated. One little omission at a time. That's how it always works with you. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. Dad stepped forward. Tell me right now, did you intercept her letters while she was deployed? Camille's voice rose. Oh my God, I didn't intercept anything. What is this, a spy movie? Answer the question, he said. I don't remember, she shouted. You don't remember, I repeated. Wow. Camille scoffed. You're blaming me because you pushed people away and now you want someone to blame for it. Classic victim complex. I stared at her. Not angry. Not shocked. Just tired. I was deployed in a war zone, Camille. Do you know what it's like to be halfway around the world, dodging mortars, missing Thanksgiving, and wondering why your own mother won't return a letter? Mom put a hand to her mouth. Do you know what it's like, I continued, to sit on a dusty cot, rereading the same postcard 5 times because it's the only proof you still exist to someone back home? I wasn't yelling. I didn't need to. And do you know what it's like to come home and realize you were erased from the family photo before you even landed? Camille didn't speak. For once, she didn't have a comeback, probably because there's no charming way to explain emotional sabotage. Dad's voice was tight. Did you block her number from the group chat? I didn't, she stopped herself. I might have muted it. Once. For a little while. For how long? I asked. She shrugged. I don't know. A few months? 4 years, I said. I checked. The room was frozen. Forks paused midair. Even the crackling of the fireplace in the corner sounded awkward. I put the phone down on the counter. Let me tell you what I did while you were all unbothered, I said. I saved every receipt. I screenshot every unanswered message. I kept every bounce-back email, every postmarked envelope. And I didn't do it to start a war. I did it because gaslighting only works when there's no record. Trey looked pale. Mom had tears in her eyes. Camille? She was still trying to look composed, but her jaw was clenched tight enough to snap teeth. I turned to Dad. When she told you I wasn't coming tonight, what did you feel? He blinked. Relief, honestly. I thought we wouldn't have to deal with tension. I nodded. Exactly. And Camille knew that. She counted on it. I wasn't even mad anymore. I'd done mad. This was something else, clarity, maybe. Or just fatigue from carrying everyone's discomfort for years. Camille crossed her arms. You're making this about you. You always do. No, I said. You made this about me when you started erasing me. I'm just giving you back the pieces. Nobody clapped. Nobody said thank you. But no one defended her either. That was new. I walked past her like she wasn't even standing there. She flinched, just slightly, like she thought I'd stop and keep fighting her in front of everyone. But I wasn't there to spar. I was there to drop the whole damn file. I set my phone on the coffee table and pulled a flash drive out of my coat pocket. Camille stared at it like I'd just laid down a grenade. Dad blinked. What's that? Receipts, I said. Trey muttered under his breath. Of course she brought a flash drive. Shut up. Camille snapped. It's not a presentation, I said. I'm not here to entertain anyone. I just got tired of defending myself with stories while she destroyed me with silence. I walked over to the television and plugged the drive into the side port. A folder popped up on the screen. Operation, Homefront, Truth. Zip. Dad gave me a look. That's dramatic. It's accurate, I said. I spent years thinking I was the crazy one. Turns out I just wasn't documenting fast enough. Camille shifted her weight from one foot to the other, arms crossed so tight her fingernails left marks on her forearms. I clicked open the folder. Emails, screenshots, voicemails, nothing fancy. Just plain, boring proof. Evidence that I wasn't the one who disappeared, I was the one who'd been shut out. I'm not asking anyone here to take sides, I said. I just want you to see what I see. I selected a short video clip. On screen, a dimly lit barracks room appeared. I was sitting on a cot, talking on my phone. Timestamp. Christmas Eve, 3 years ago. I know you guys are probably busy, my voice said through the speakers. Just wanted to say I love you. It's quiet tonight. Anyway, I'll call again next week. I hit pause. I left that message while on 24-hour guard duty. Camille told everyone I never called. Camille laughed, fake and sharp. That could have been anyone. I turned. Really? You want to double down right now? In front of literally everyone? Silence. I moved to the following file. A series of emails between me and Staff Sergeant Rylan Cobb. Each one is polite, time-stamped, and professional. And in one thread, Rylan asks if I've heard back from my family about my homecoming. I respond. Still nothing. Guess they're over it. I had that conversation with him while trying to coordinate my transition paperwork, I said. I thought maybe my phone was broken. It wasn't. I turned to Mom. You remember when you said you didn't want to overwhelm me while I was readjusting? She nodded slowly. That's because Camille told you I needed space, that I didn't want to talk. I never said that. Camille held up a hand. Okay, this is out of control. You're acting like I'm some villain pulling puppet strings. I didn't tell people not to talk to you. I just didn't always correct them. You didn't correct anything, I said. You let people assume I was the flake, the unstable vet, the one who couldn't handle holidays. You fed them the version of me that made you look better. Dad looked over at Camille. Why? She shrugged. I don't know. Maybe because she always got the sympathy card. Maybe because you all talked about her like she was a damn hero while I was stuck here holding the family together. No one made you do that, I said. You chose it. And you used it as leverage. I could see the weight settling on Mom's face. Not guilt exactly, more like shame she'd been carrying without knowing why. I opened one last item. A screenshot from the family group chat. Camille had changed the group name to Immediate Briggs the day after I got deployed. When someone asked why, she responded, "Just cleaning things up." That one hit. You cut me out like I was dead, I said. Like I was optional. Camille's face hardened. You left. For the army, I said. Not rehab, not to join a cult. I served this country. I did my job. You made it look like I couldn't even be trusted with a dinner invite. Nobody said a word. Even the kids were frozen, wide-eyed, sensing this wasn't just another grown-up argument. Dad let out a long, steady breath. You never said anything, he told me. Because every time I tried, it made things worse, I said. And because for a long time, I thought maybe I really was the problem. That. Mom stepped forward. Joanna, why didn't you tell me this sooner? I did, I said. You just never got the message. I unplugged the drive and set it on the mantel like it belonged there. No one moved. I didn't either. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. The proof was sitting in every stunned face in that living room. What came next wasn't my responsibility. Camille sat down slowly as if she were afraid someone might pull the chair out from under her. For once, she looked small. Not in the way that begged for pity, just exposed. Real. No sparkle, no spin. Trey stood next to the piano, chewing the inside of his cheek. I think he finally realized this wasn't a fight over one dinner. It was a slow dismantling of an entire version of our family he'd never questioned. Do you want to sit? Mom asked me cautiously, as if I might bark if she got too close. I'm good, I said. The couch was still full, anyway. Funny how there's always space when you're not there, but never when you are. Dad stepped back toward the center of the room, hands in his pockets like he was trying to figure out what to do with them. This got out of hand, he muttered. Did it? I asked. Or did it finally make sense? He didn't answer. I walked toward the kitchen, not because I needed anything but because standing in the middle of the living room felt like being under a microscope. I grabbed a glass from the cupboard. The same set we'd had since I was 12. It was weird how some things stay the same while everything else gets rewritten around them. Behind me, I heard Camille say something under her breath. I turned. You got something to add? She looked up at me like she was finally too tired to fake it. Yeah, she said. I didn't think you'd come back. Well, I said, you were half right. She rolled her eyes. I didn't mean. No, I know exactly what you meant, I cut in. You just didn't think I'd walk back in with receipts. You thought I'd disappear like always. That I'd take the hit and vanish so you could stay spotless. You always make me the bad guy, she said. I raised an eyebrow. I didn't make you anything. I just stopped covering for you. Mom finally spoke again. Girls, please. Don't, I said. This isn't a both sides thing. One of us manipulated everyone here. The other one's been trying to claw her way back into this room for years. Camille laughed just once. It wasn't amused. You think you're some kind of victim, she said. But you've always been a pain in the ass. You left. You got out, and the rest of us had to pick up the pieces every time you flaked. I took a breath. Not deep, not dramatic. Just controlled. I didn't flake, I said. I served. I missed birthdays because I was halfway across the world. I missed dinners because I was recovering from deployment. I missed phone calls because I thought my family was done with me. Nobody jumped to correct me. I was wrong, I added. Turns out they just never got the chance. Camille stood up. She looked around like she couldn't believe no one was stepping in. Mom shifted but didn't move toward her. Dad didn't even glance her way. Trey leaned back against the wall. You've been shady for years, Camille. We just didn't want to deal with it. Excuse me? She snapped. You heard me, he said. You made everything about you. Always. This is just the first time it's caught up. She stared at him like he was a stranger. I can't believe you're siding with her, she whispered. I'm not siding, he said. I'm seeing. That shut her up. I went back to the sink, poured myself some water, and took a slow sip. My hands weren't shaking anymore. Camille sat back down, arms folded, lips pressed into a thin line. Dad cleared his throat. Joanna, he said carefully, like I might bolt. Would you like to stay for dinner? I looked around the room. The food was half-eaten. The candles had burned down a few inches. The tension hadn't left the air, it had just settled. Sure, I said. If there's room. There's room, he said. Camille didn't speak. I sat at the end of the table next to my cousin Marla, who hadn't said much all night. She leaned in slightly and whispered. I always wondered what was really going on. I nodded. Now you know. I didn't touch the food. I wasn't hungry for that kind of comfort. The table was full, but the air was thinner than ever. No one asked Camille to pass anything. No one looked at her unless it was to check if she might explode. I sat upright, hands in my lap, the plate in front of me untouched. Marla gave me a soft glance as if she was silently apologizing for all the years she hadn't asked questions. I didn't blame her. Camille made it easy not to. Across from me, Camille was picking at the edge of her napkin like she wanted to crawl inside it and disappear. Dad tried to reset the mood. So, turkey's good, he said, stabbing his fork into it like he was trying to make the conversation move. No one laughed. No one even pretended. Camille finally broke the silence. I didn't do all of this to hurt her. I looked at her, flat. You did all of it to protect yourself. She tilted her head like I'd missed the point. I was trying to keep things peaceful. For who? I asked. Not me. You've always been intense, Joanna. Since we were kids, everything was high stakes with you. Maybe because everything was, I said. For me, showing up meant something. For you, it was just optics. You don't know what it was like being here when you left, she snapped. Everyone looked at me like I was the disappointment because you were off serving the country. Like I was selfish just for living a normal life. And so, Dad set his fork down. Nobody said that, he said. They didn't have to, Camille said. It was in every comment. Joanna's so brave. Joanna's doing something important. I had to sit through every holiday listening to her get praised while I refilled wine glasses and planned meals. Mom opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I worked my ass off to make this house feel normal while you were gone. Camille continued. I handled birthdays, family photos, bills, the group chat, everything. And you just show up, drop some emails, and suddenly I'm the bad guy? You didn't just handle things, I said. You edited them. Camille stood up, her chair scraping hard against the wood floor. I didn't want to deal with your moods. Your guilt trips, your trauma disguised as judgment. That's not what this is, I said calmly. You didn't erase me because I was dramatic. You erased me because I didn't fit the version of the family you wanted to display. She was breathing heavier now. Her hands were clenched at her sides. You think you're better than me because you put on a uniform. No, I said. I think I was honest about who I was. You performed, I survived. Her jaw tightened. You're unbelievable. Yeah, I said. That's what gaslighting does. It makes you unbelievable even when you're telling the truth. Trey stood slowly, eyes fixed on Camille. Did you really tell Aunt Sherry that Joanna had a breakdown and wasn't allowed to fly? Camille hesitated. I didn't say she wasn't allowed. I said she shouldn't. Same difference, Trey said. And it's a lie. Camille turned to our mother. You knew I didn't mean harm, right? Mom didn't answer. Mom? Her voice was smaller now. I thought you two just didn't get along, Mom said, barely audible. I didn't realize. You didn't want to realize, I said. Because she made everything easier to believe. I didn't. Camille grabbed her wine glass, but her hand shook. She set it back down. I didn't mean for it to get this far, she mumbled. But it did, I said. Nobody was yelling. That was the scary part. It was all too calm now, too clinical, like we were reading her off a list of charges and letting her process it in real time. She sat down slowly, eyes down, and for the first time, she looked outnumbered. Dad leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Why didn't you just talk to us?" "Because she made it so easy not to," I said. "She spoke for me when I was gone. She answered texts I never saw. She filled in blanks I didn't even know existed." "I thought I was helping," Camille whispered. "You weren't," Mom said. "You were deciding." There was a silence that didn't feel like tension. It felt like something unraveling. Camille looked around like she was searching for sympathy, but finding dust. Trey exhaled through his nose. "You spent years making Joanna the problem. Turns out you were just afraid of not being the favorite." Camille's eyes flicked toward him like he'd slapped her. "I never wanted to be the favorite," she said. "Then why did you work so hard to make sure I wasn't?" I asked. She didn't have an answer. Dad pushed his plate away like he couldn't stand the taste of any of it anymore. He didn't look at Camille. Didn't look at me. Just stared down at the space in front of him like maybe it used to hold something he could trust. The room was thick with heat, not from the food but from the shift that had finally settled across the table. Camille wasn't leading the energy anymore. She wasn't steering anything. And Dad, who had always kept the peace by pretending everything was fine, wasn't doing that tonight. He looked up slowly, his voice low. "Camille, did you send an email to your uncle last year saying Joanna was under psychiatric care?" Her face froze like someone had shut the lights off inside. What? "I just remembered it," he said. "Joel brought it up in the garage earlier. Said he hoped Joanna was doing better. Said he was praying for her recovery. And I didn't know what he meant, but now I do." Camille opened her mouth, closed it, and then tried again. "I might have said something like that, but it wasn't meant to be literal. It was a lie," he said, cutting her off. "It was a lie." She shifted in her seat. "I didn't think he'd take it that seriously." "That's the problem," Dad said. "You didn't think. Or you did, and you thought we'd all just nod along like we always do." Mom looked down at her napkin, her hands shaking slightly as she folded and refolded it. "I can't believe this," Camille said, laughing nervously. "You're acting like I committed a crime." "I just tried to manage the fallout." "What fallout?" Dad asked. "There was no fallout to manage. There was just Joanna. Our daughter. Your sister. Someone who wanted to be part of this family." Camille stood up again as if being at the table made her skin itch. "I've done everything for this family. I've hosted holidays, sent thank you cards, reminded people about birthdays. You think that just happens by itself? You think logistics earns you moral credit?" I asked. "That doing the group text makes you the good guy?" "No," she snapped. "But it sure as hell means I was holding it all together while you were off playing hero." Dad's head tilted just slightly. "Playing hero?" Camille swallowed. "I didn't mean it like that." "Yes, you did," I said. And this time, he didn't stop me. "You meant it exactly like that. You always have. You think my service was some attention stunt. That everything I went through was just a setup to make you look small. Because that's how you treat me," she shouted. "I haven't treated you like anything," I said. "I've barely been here. You created the version of me you could control and ran with it." She looked at Dad again, desperate now. "You're seriously buying into this?" "I'm seriously realizing how much I didn't see," he said. She blinked like he'd slapped her. "I thought you were the one keeping us close," he continued. "But now I'm wondering if you were just keeping the version of us that made you comfortable." No one corrected him. Not even Mom. Trey reached for his glass of water and mumbled, "Honestly, it tracks." "Wow," Camille said, laughing bitterly. "This is amazing." Everyone suddenly got their knives out. "No one's stabbing you," I said. "We're just not pretending you didn't cut first." Camille stared at me, then at Dad. "You always favored her," she said. "Even when you thought she was messed up, you still wanted her at the table." "I wanted her because she was part of this family," he said. "And now I'm wondering how many times I let you convince me she wasn't." The silence after that wasn't heavy, it was clean. Like a table finally cleared of the junk you didn't realize had piled up. Camille didn't speak. For once, she didn't have a way to reframe it. The room wasn't bending to her anymore. Dad looked at me. "You have more?" he asked. "More? Proof?" I shook my head. I didn't bring it to dump everything on the table. I brought it because I needed to stop wondering if I imagined it. He nodded once, slowly. You didn't. That was the first time he said something that felt like an anchor. Camille sat back down, quiet now. Her plate was still full. No one passed her anything. No one asked if she wanted dessert. And that, weirdly, said more than the last hour combined. I reached for my phone, not to defend myself, just to finish the story. The screen lit up with familiar folders. No one flinched this time. They knew I wasn't pulling stunts. I was just cutting through the static. Camille stared at her untouched plate, fingers wrapped tightly around her glass like it might anchor her back into relevance. I opened the voice memo app. This isn't for drama, I said. It's for context. I tapped to play. Through the speaker came the faint sound of my boots on snow, the wind, and then Camille's voice clear as daylight. We don't want you here. Go ruin someone else's holiday. A few seconds later, that should do it. Silence dropped like a guillotine. Even the kids went still. Camille's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Dad exhaled slowly. Trey looked stunned, like he just witnessed a magic trick that was a crime. She said that at the door, I said. 10 minutes before you all thought I ghosted you. Mom looked like someone had unplugged her. Why would you say that? She asked Camille, voice trembling. I didn't know she was recording, Camille started. Not the point, Trey cut in. No, I added. The point is, she said it. Camille sat back in her chair as if gravity had just gotten stronger. I was mad, she muttered. It wasn't supposed to come out like that. But it did, Dad said, his voice suddenly sharper than I'd ever heard it. He looked across the table, and for a second, I saw him not as the man who continually smoothed over family tension, but as someone who realized he'd backed the wrong horse for years. You told us she wasn't coming, he said. And then you locked the door behind her. That's not a slip-up, that's a system. Camille's jaw clenched. I didn't plan. You did, I said. Because that's how you've always worked. Quiet edits. Soft sabotage. You didn't need to scream or hit. You just controlled the narrative. And we let you. Marla leaned forward, her voice quiet but solid. I saw the posts. I saw how you worded things. It was always subtle but always framed. Camille laughed a dry, humorless bark. Are you all seriously ganging up on me now? No, I said. You've just run out of places to hide. I opened the last clip. This one wasn't a recording, it was a video file. I tapped it. The screen filled with the image of a dusty tent and rows of bunks behind a small camera. And then his face. Staff Sergeant Rylan Cobb. Straight posture, military haircut, voice even. Hey, Briggs family, he began. I'm not here to embarrass anyone. I just want to speak on behalf of Sergeant Joanna Briggs, who served with me overseas. She's not the type to brag, so I'll do it for her. She kept our unit alive more than once through pure planning, grit, and heart. She never missed a holiday call unless we were blacked out in the field. And she always asked if her packages came from home. When they didn't, she smiled like it didn't matter. But it did. A pause, then. She deserved better. From a lot of people. The screen went black. No one said a word. I locked my phone and put it down like a final exhibit. That's all I brought. Dad's eyes stayed on the phone. He made that for you? He offered, I said. After I told him everything. I wasn't sure I'd use it, but I guess I needed to know someone outside this house remembered who I was. Camille sat motionless. I couldn't tell if she was angry, ashamed, or just calculating her next move. But she didn't speak. Trey cleared his throat. That's the first time I've heard someone talk about you like that, Joe. Because no one ever asked, I said. You all let Camille fill in the blanks. Dad looked at Camille. Did you ever once think about how that would feel? To be shut out while still trying to stay connected? Her voice was so quiet it barely registered. I thought I was protecting everyone. From what? Mom asked, her tone finally shifting from shock to sharp. Camille didn't answer. You thought managing the story made it better, I said. But it just made me a villain in your version. One you could control, shape, and delete if needed. I didn't mean to delete you, she whispered. You didn't have to mean it, I said. You just had to keep doing it. There was no dramatic gasp, no slamming doors, just stillness. Like the truth had finally arrived and wasn't going anywhere. Dad stood up so suddenly, his chair scraped against the floor like a verdict. Everyone flinched. Camille looked up like she'd been caught mid-theft, still hoping the store alarm was a mistake. But Dad wasn't yelling. That would have made things easier. He was calm. And that's what made it worse. I need you to leave, he said. Camille blinked. What? You heard me. Her voice cracked, defensive but still clinging to composure. You're asking me to leave? From my family's house? This is all of our family's house, he said. But you made it yours when you decided who counted and who didn't. She looked around the table for support. Nobody moved. Mom looked stunned but not shocked. Trey's eyes were locked on his napkin like it might save him from having to speak. Marla didn't blink. Dad, Camille tried. Come on. You know I didn't mean for it to go this far. He nodded. I believe you didn't mean for it to blow up. I don't believe you didn't mean it. That's not fair, she snapped. What you did to your sister wasn't fair, he said. So maybe we're finally even. Her mouth dropped open. I hosted every holiday here for the last 5 years, she said. And you curated the guest list like it was a charity gala, I said flatly. She spun toward me, eyes blazing. You think this is easy? Holding this family together while you run off, playing martyr? Dad stepped between us, not protectively, just firmly. Like a line had been drawn, and she was on the wrong side of it. This isn't a punishment, he said. It's a consequence. Camille shook her head in disbelief. So she waltzes in, plays some sad videos, and suddenly she's the victim and I'm the villain? No, I said. You wrote that part yourself. I just brought the script. You're all insane, she muttered. You'll regret this. Probably not tonight, Trey said without looking up. That one landed hard. Camille's face went still. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her purse. She didn't yell, didn't throw anything. She just stood up and realized she had no idea what to say when her usual tools, charm, control, pity, weren't working. I'm not doing this, she said to no one in particular. No one stopped her. She walked to the entryway in slow, rigid steps. The kind you take when you're trying not to look like you're running. She grabbed her coat but didn't put it on. Opened the door. The cold blew in, sharp and fast. She looked back once, expecting someone to break. Someone to say, wait. Someone to make this easier. But the only sound in the room was the wind. And then she left. The door clicked shut behind her. Nobody moved. Mom was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. What just happened? No one answered. Not because we didn't know, but because it was the first time something had happened in that house that didn't get explained away. Dad turned and sat back down in his chair. He looked 10 pounds lighter, like something he didn't realize had been pressing on his chest was suddenly gone. She's our daughter, Mom said quietly. He nodded. So is Joanna. Silence again. But this time, it didn't ache. It breathed. I stayed in my seat, still not hungry, still not needing to speak first. It wasn't a victory. It wasn't revenge. It was something closer to neutral, like the balance had finally shifted back to the center. Marla broke it gently. Anyone want to heat up the apple pie? Trey nodded slowly. Yeah, I could eat. That was all it took. Dishes started moving again. A few chairs slid. No one cheered. But no one whispered either. It wasn't a celebration. It was a restart. I stayed seated while everyone moved around me like the room was resetting without needing my permission. Plates clinked gently. Someone turned down the music. The lights stayed the same, but everything felt different, like someone had finally cracked a window open in a stale room. Mom stepped into the kitchen without saying anything. She moved slower than usual as her limbs suddenly remembered they were tired. Trey took over, clearing the table. That part felt new. I stayed where I was, not frozen, just unsure if I was supposed to do something. For the first time all night, there wasn't a fire to put out. No explosion to walk away from. Marla slid into the seat beside me with 2 mugs of coffee. She didn't say anything at first, just handed one over and waited. "You okay?" she asked after a while. "I don't know," I said. "I didn't come here to burn the house down." "You didn't," she said. "You just pointed out it was already on fire." "Oh." I stared into the coffee. It was the same brand we always had growing up, cheap, too strong, oddly comforting. "I didn't want it to end like that," I said. "I didn't want it to end at all." Marla nodded. "People like Camille don't think they're ending anything. They think they're maintaining, until someone walks in and reminds them that truth exists." In the background, I heard Mom rinsing dishes. Dad dried them. That might have been the most surreal moment of the night. "Do you think she'll come back?" I asked. Marla shrugged. "Does it matter?" I thought about that longer than I expected to. Because for so long, the only thing I wanted was to be let back in. Now I was inside, and the one who shoved me out had been the one ejected. I didn't feel better, but I didn't feel erased. Trey walked by and nudged my arm. "You want me to save you a slice of that pie you brought?" "Please," I said. He smiled. Just a little. Like a peace offering made without apology but with presence. Dad approached a few minutes later, drying his hands on a dish towel like he didn't know how to walk up to his daughter. He sat across from me. "I owe you something," he said. "You don't," I replied automatically. "I do," he said again, slower this time. "I believed the version of you I was given. That's on me." "You trusted the one who made it easier," I said. "That's human." He looked tired. Not just from age but from suddenly having to rethink how many years he'd gotten it wrong. "I never thought you were lying," he said. "I just thought you'd changed. That the army made you colder. That you didn't want us." "I didn't want the version of you that only existed when Camille narrated everything," I said. "But I never stopped wanting you." His jaw flexed just slightly. "She always took up more space," he said. "I didn't want more space," I said. "I just wanted a place." He nodded, slow and quiet. "I should have asked why you pulled away instead of assuming you chose it," he said. "You didn't know you were choosing too," I replied. That one landed. He sat there for a while longer, like being near me was part of his reorientation. "I don't expect you to forgive her," he said. "But I hope you'll stay." "I haven't decided," I said. "But I'm not running." He nodded again, stood, and went back to the kitchen. It wasn't dramatic. It was honest. And somehow, that mattered more. Mom joined me next. She didn't sit, just hovered for a second, holding a clean dish towel like it gave her purpose. "I should have seen it," she said. "You weren't supposed to," I replied. That was the point. She stared at me for a long time. "She told me once that she didn't think you'd come back," she said. "I know," I said. "She told me too." Mom's face crumpled in a way I hadn't seen since the funeral of her sister. Not loud grief. Quiet, private shame. "She's been doing this since you were kids," she whispered. "But I thought it was sibling rivalry. I thought you were strong, so I didn't intervene." "You mistook silence for strength," I said. She blinked hard. I did. I finally stood up, looked her in the eye. "I don't need you to make up for it," I said. "I just need you to see me, and not through her." "I do now," she said. And that was enough for tonight. Not perfect. Not healed. But enough. I grabbed a trash bag and started picking up the wrapping paper no one had touched. It was something to do with my hands. Something normal, quiet, harmless. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I just didn't want to sit in this stillness that had too many eyes and not enough distraction. Trey joined me with another bag. "She always made you do this part," he said. "The cleanup." "Yeah," I muttered. "She called it balance." He smirked. "She called it delegation." I smiled without meaning to. It didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like gravity had shifted back to neutral. The pile of discarded bows, crushed boxes, and name tags still taped to ripped corners felt oddly symbolic. A mess that once looked pretty is now stripped of all illusion. I dumped the bag into the kitchen bin and moved on. Marla sat cross-legged on the living room floor, folding leftover gift bags into a neat stack. "So, what now?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "I think I rest." She nodded. "You earned that." Mom handed me a mug of tea. Not coffee this time. Chamomile. I could tell from the smell. It was warm and unspoken, like she didn't have another apology in her, but she wasn't done showing up. We all moved through the house like people reclaiming a crime scene and not afraid of it anymore, but not pretending it hadn't happened. Dad was outside, salting the porch. I saw him through the window. He didn't need to do that. No one else was coming or going. Maybe he just needed to move, too. Maybe he needed to fix something small because he couldn't fix the years. Later that night, I pulled on some old pajamas Mom had stashed in my room. The same flannel pattern I'd hated as a teenager. Felt better now. Like they'd waited for me, not because anyone expected me to come back, but because someone hoped I would. My room was still weirdly untouched, like it hadn't been invaded, just frozen. There were trophies on the shelf that didn't matter anymore, books I never finished, a photo of me at 14 wearing braces and too much eyeliner. And there was the card I'd mailed them from Iraq still taped to the mirror. I wasn't sure if it had been forgotten or preserved, but I didn't ask. I turned off the light and let the quiet settle. Not heavy, not sharp, just still. The next morning, I came downstairs to Dad frying bacon like he was trying to make up for every awkward breakfast ever served. Mom was pouring coffee. Trey was already halfway through a cinnamon roll as he'd slept through the last decade of drama. "Want some eggs?" Dad asked. "I can make my own," I said. "I know," he replied. "But I'm offering." That landed better than he realized. We ate like people still learning how to chew around truth. No one brought up Camille. Not because we were avoiding her, because she wasn't the subject anymore. I wasn't the side character. I wasn't the burden. I was just there. Present. Unflinching. After breakfast, I helped Mom repack the ornaments. She paused at one of the glass balls, red, chipped, probably from the 90s. "This was the year you came home from basic," she said. "I remember," I replied. "We had snow that stuck." She smiled faintly. "You wore your uniform to Christmas Eve Mass." "Camille hated that," I said. "She said it made her look like she was doing nothing with her life." "She said that out loud?" "No," Mom whispered. "But it was in her face." I wrapped the ornament in tissue and placed it in the box. "This doesn't mean you all hate her now," I said. "No," Mom said. "It means we finally see her clearly." That was enough. Seeing wasn't the same as hating. It was more powerful. I stayed 2 more days. Not because anyone begged. Just because no one made me feel like a guest. We watched dumb movies, ate too much pie, and talked about real things. Small stuff, big stuff. Life stuff. It wasn't about Camille anymore. It was about what came after. Not revenge. Not vindication. Just peace. And peace doesn't always show up loud, it shows up when you stop waiting for someone to ruin it. The email landed in my inbox like a stray bullet, silent but sharp. No subject line. No greeting. Just her name in the sender field and a timestamp that said 2:04 a.m., the time of night when regret masquerades as courage and guilt gets dressed up as righteousness. I stared at it for a full minute before I opened it. I didn't flinch. I didn't brace. I'd been shot at before, this wasn't that. The message was short. Not angry. Worse, it was smug. "I know you think you won. But you don't know what it's like to be invisible. You were always the favorite, you just didn't notice because you were too busy playing the victim. Someday when they turn on you, don't come running to me." That was it. No apology. No remorse. No ownership. Just one last performance from a stage that no longer existed. I sat there in my chair. The same kitchen I grew up in was now filled with a different air. Dad was outside again, fixing the garage light. Mom was upstairs on a call. The house didn't know a grenade had just been thrown. Or maybe it didn't care anymore. I hovered over the delete button. Then I didn't press it. I hit reply. I didn't overthink it. I didn't edit it 5 times. I didn't try to be poetic. I just told the truth, clean, blunt, and final. "I used to want your love. Then I wanted your apology. Now I don't need either." I don't need to win. I just needed to stop losing myself every time you needed to feel big. You can stay gone. I'll stay whole. And then I hit send. After that, I blocked her email. Not out of spite. Out of peace. Because healing doesn't always look like a reunion. Sometimes, it looks like a clean inbox and a quieter mind. Later that day, Trey knocked on my doorframe and held up his phone. She's posting again, he said. I didn't even need to look. Let me guess, I said. Cryptic captions and snowflake emojis? He chuckled. Basically, something about boundaries and letting go of toxicity. She's not letting go, I said. She's rebranding. Think anyone's buying it? Not anymore. He nodded and put his phone away. Good. There was a quiet between us I hadn't felt since we were kids. Not tense, just settled. You hosting New Year's this year? He asked. I looked at him for a second, then smiled. Yeah, I said. Yeah, I think I am. He smiled back. Let me know if you need help. He left the room, and I stood there for a moment longer, watching the email icon disappear from my blocked list. There was no confetti. No internal fireworks. Just a slow, steady breath that didn't catch in my throat this time. That night, I made a list. Not of guests, not of groceries. Just a short, handwritten note. Things I will no longer carry. Blame I didn't earn. Silence that protects someone else's comfort. Apologies, I never got it, but I kept preparing for. A version of me I never chose. I folded it in half and tucked it into my wallet. I did not want to reread it just to know it was there. By dinner, the sky outside had gone gray, with soft flurries brushing against the windows. I sat by the fireplace with a blanket around my shoulders, not to warm up, but to stay grounded. Mom joined me after a while, setting down 2 cups of tea. I saw Trey's message, she said. I assume she emailed? Yeah. You okay? Better than I expected, I said. She looked at me carefully, like trying to understand a version of me she never got to know. I'm proud of you, she said quietly. I'm proud of me too, I replied. She smiled, and it wasn't sad. It wasn't tight with effort, it was just real. We sat there together, 2 women finally stripped of stories that weren't ours to carry. The room was calm. No one had to explain anything. No one had to fix the past in one conversation. The truth had landed. And this time, it stayed. I tossed the last Christmas napkin in the trash and reached for a fresh notepad. It was time to plan the New Year's dinner, and this time, I wasn't asking for permission. I wasn't tiptoeing around anyone's ego or pretending everyone belonged just because they shared DNA. The rules had changed. Or maybe they'd finally been written down for real. The guest list was short. Just the ones who didn't flinch when the truth showed up. People who didn't need a filtered version of me to feel comfortable. Dad, Mom, Trey, Marla, a couple of cousins who'd stopped pretending Camille was just going through something. That was it. I wrote their names one by one, not in some performative moment of reclaiming power, but because it felt good to see only what was real. No guessing. No gaslighting. Just people who'd earned a seat. I texted Mom. Dinner at mine, New Year's Eve, casual, pies required. Probably, she responded. I'll bring 2. Camille's not invited, right? No, I wrote back. And no one's asking. The silence after that felt clean. Not avoidance alignment. I cleaned the living room with a weird kind of focus. Wiping surfaces like I was dusting off the old version of myself, the one who used to hold her breath during family events, praying not to be the problem. Not anymore. On the 31st, my house glowed in quiet gold. String lights across the ceiling. Mismatched plates. No theme, no performance, just warmth. People started showing up early. Marla brought a still warm casserole wrapped in a kitchen towel as it came straight from memory. Dad arrives with a bottle of wine and a pie Mom never made when Camille was around banana cream, because Camille said the smell made her gag. This is for you, he said, setting it down with a grin. Mom came in behind him with a tin of her famous sugar cookies. No makeup. Hair pulled back. Her piece wasn't polished. It was earned. Trey showed up last, holding a six-pack and a giant salad like he couldn't commit to one personality. "I brought the healthy and the honest," he said. "You decide which is which." We laughed. Real laughter. Not the kind that tries to cover cracks, but the kind that comes when you know no one here is hiding a knife. We ate, drank, and repeated seconds without guilt. No one mentioned Camille. Her name didn't hang in the air like it used to. No questions. No tension. Just absence, and not the painful kind. The kind that makes room. Dad gave a toast. I didn't expect it. He stood up, holding a glass of cheap white wine, eyes scanning the room as he saw it correctly for the first time. "I spent a lot of years trying to keep things from falling apart," he said. "Turns out, they already had, I just didn't want to admit it." The room was still. He looked at me. "This year, I want to thank the one person here who taught me that love without honesty isn't love, it's fear dressed in manners." He raised his glass. "To Joanna. For setting the boundary we were too afraid to name." Everyone clinked. I didn't cry. I just smiled and let the moment exist, unruined by doubt. Later that night, I found myself outside on the porch, barefoot, holding a cup of tea. It was freezing but peaceful. Marla joined me, wrapped in a blanket. "You realize," she said, "this is probably the first time you've ever hosted something without apologizing for who you are." "Feels good," I said. "Looks better," she replied. We sat there as midnight hit. No countdown, no chaos. Just the sound of wind brushing through bare trees and the low hum of music from inside. Camille didn't text. Didn't call. Didn't crash. And no one waited for her. That was the most significant shift of all, not that she was gone, but that no one left a chair just in case. Mom had started doing dishes inside, even though I told her not to. Dad dried. Trey packed leftovers like he finally knew where they were supposed to go. There was no speech. No forced sentimentality. Just people who stayed, cleaned, laughed, and meant it. When the door finally closed behind the last guest, I didn't collapse, I didn't spiral. I just stood there, the house quiet and my heart steady. Not lonely. Not relieved. Just free. I brewed a fresh cup of coffee and let the silence fill the room without apology. The table was clean. The air was warm. No leftover arguments were hiding in the corners, no tension folded under the napkins. Just sunlight through the blinds and the soft hum of a life that no longer needed defense. I took the coffee out to the porch. The cold didn't bite the same anymore. Maybe because I wasn't flinching before it hit me. I just stood there, barefoot again, as I'd finally stopped guarding myself against the weather I could handle. Across the street, a neighbor waved. I waved back. I didn't know his name. Didn't need to. It felt nice to be part of a quiet morning, part of something still. My phone was on the counter inside. No one was blowing it up. No emergencies. No cryptic guilt texts. No Camille. Just quiet. And God, it felt earned. I sat on the porch swing, pulled the blanket around my shoulders, and watched the sky shift colors like it was giving me a clean slate. Not in a dramatic movie moment way. Just slow. Real. Present. I didn't replay the dinner. Didn't relive the confrontation. Didn't scroll through any of it like evidence. It happened. It was seen. It was done. A few days later, I heard from Trey. Short text. She moved. Some town in Oregon. No one's heard much else. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, just because there was nothing left to say. Let her start over if she wanted. Let her spin another version of herself in a new place, to new people, in a narrative where she's never the problem. She could have that. I wasn't following anymore. I was too busy living. I started running again. Not for punishment. For breath. For rhythm. My legs didn't feel heavy with old resentment, they just moved. I passed the park we used to visit as kids and didn't look away. There was no sting. Just space. I booked a weekend trip for myself. Alone. Cabin, trees, books. No itinerary. Just the freedom to be where I wanted, when I wanted, without checking in or checking boxes. Mom texted to ask what snacks I like these days. I told her. She sent me a box. Nothing fancy, trail mix, some tea, a note in her handwriting that said, "I see you now. I won't stop." I didn't cry, but I held onto that card longer than I needed to. Dad started calling on Sundays. Sometimes just to talk. Sometimes just to listen. He didn't rush to fix things anymore. He just stayed present. Marla dropped by one afternoon with a box labeled for the rebuild. Inside were old photos, childhood notes, and a few ornaments she'd found in her attic. "You deserve to hold your story again," she said. So I did. Not to prove anything. Not to show Camille what she'd lost. Just to remember who I'd always been before her edits. Spring crept in like a secret that didn't need to announce itself. The trees bloomed without permission. My windows stayed open longer. The air was soft again. I threw a dinner in April. 12 people. The same ones from New Year's, plus a couple of friends who'd seen me outside of the family script. We ate on the patio. No speeches this time. Just laughter bouncing off the fence, authentic and rooted. After dessert, Dad stood up not to toast, just to stretch, but he looked at me and smiled. "You built this," he said simply. Not praise. Not debt. Just truth. I nodded. Because I had. Not alone. But from the ground up. With boundaries, with honesty, and with the right people who didn't need a role to love me. That night, after everyone left, I rinsed dishes in silence. I let the quiet stay. I didn't fill it with music, podcasts, or noise. I liked hearing myself breathe. That was new. I walked past the hallway mirror. Caught a glimpse of myself. Not posed. Not performing. Just standing in my own house, in my skin. And for once, I didn't wonder if I was too much. Didn't shrink. Didn't scan the room for approval. I looked like someone who came home. Not just to a house, but to a self that wasn't waiting for permission anymore. Not the forgotten sister. It's not the backup plan. Not the invisible soldier. Just me. Still standing. Still whole. And finally unwritten by anyone but myself. Some stories don't end with fireworks or final words. They end quietly when the noise finally stops, when the chaos doesn't come back, and you realize you're not holding your breath anymore. That's what healing looked like for me. Not Camille begging for forgiveness. Not a dramatic reunion. Just silence that didn't scare me, and a life that didn't shrink to make space for someone else's comfort. If you've ever been made to feel like the problem just for existing, let this remind you, their version of you doesn't get the last word. You do. And sometimes, walking away isn't giving up. It's coming home. If you're into revenge stories with real depth, especially family revenge stories that cut deep and stay with you, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. We tell family drama the way it feels, raw, honest, and a little too real sometimes. You won't want to miss the next one.